youngsters communicating in a video fantasy land.
Hey, what do you think you're doing knocking on this door like that?
The answers are in the 3D pictures. Now, what is the aircraft on top?
Space shuttle.
You may think that kids today have more fun experiences and memories than those in the 70s, but in retrospect, kids in the 70s had pretty much everything they ever wanted to stay entertained. Let's have a look at the 1970s things that kids no longer do. But before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There was nothing as refreshing, fun, and daunting in the 1970s as riding your bike outdoors with friends or racing each other with a cool breeze on your face. Whether you were stunting or exploring the off-roads, it was always a great time. The only problem was, children in the 70s were riding bikes without helmets. Besides the fact that bike helmets were not so popular and had only become commercial in the late 70s, kids loved the feeling of riding their bikes without any form of obstruction on their noggin. You absolutely could not convince a child of the advantages, and if by chance a child was found wearing a helmet while the rest rode without theirs, that rider became the butt of everyone's joke for the day. Parents soon began to enforce the use of helmets to protect their children from injuries, as bicycle accidents were often quite brutal. With so many protective gears used by children today, like helmets, pads, and forms of body armor, 70s kids will always be remembered as the daredevils that conquered the roads, throwing caution to the wind and sometimes paying the price. The doorbell ditch and runaway prank was a classic misdemeanor that was very common with kids as a form of entertainment. There was no technology to engage in, so they made do with whatever ideas helped them pass the time. They would go from door to door, ringing the bell and then running away before the occupants of the house could get there. These pranks were worse at even certain times of year, like Halloween and April Fool's Day, and every successful ding-dong ditch made the kids full of joy and adrenaline, no matter how frustrating it may have been to the homeowner. Today, many homes have fences which could prevent such pranks, and there are also doorbell cameras, security dogs, and stricter law enforcement standards that make the prank quite problematic in this day and age. Playing outside until dark was certainly a norm in the 70s. There was very little to worry about back then. The concept of stranger danger was quite new, and there wasn't very much to be spooked about. Children usually played in groups and looked after one another, and they were accustomed to all the nooks and crannies of the neighborhood, so they knew the safest places to play and at what times. Unless they decided to explore a haunted house down the road late at night, other than that, they were quite safe. The adults couldn't wait to get the children out of the house so that they could catch up on their favorite shows, spend time with other adults, and catch up on each other's lives. Children today will never be found outside the house for all that long. Besides safety reasons, there are other internal distractions like video games, the home theater, and other couch entertainment. From explosive chemistry sets to poisonous toys, stick with us to find out more about the things kids no longer do. Remember the giggling and screaming of kids sliding down hills on cardboard in the 1970s? The low grass hill was often as long as 50 meters in length with a steep angle. Way down at the bottom, you could find dense bushes, poison ivy, and scrub brush, but it didn't matter to nature lovers. Kids would slide their way down the unpredictable and treacherous path of a grassy hill, where one single bump could sabotage the mobile craft and send them toppling down. Factors like hunger, thirst, and even bleeding elbows were not enough to deter the adventurous spirit. The cardboard sled may hold either one or two passengers as it rocks its way down the grassy hill. It wasn't the safest game to play, but maybe that was also what made it such a rush. These wild activities are now a thing of the past, but for the 70s kids, they'll always evoke nostalgia and memories of a more simple time.
Got my Viewmaster. It's Simba and Mufasa, the Lion King.
Kids take 3D view.
Do you remember the almost cinematic experience of the Viewmaster? Playing with Viewmaster reels was an activity that was popular with children and designed as a stereoscopic viewer that was used to view 3D images imprinted on a small circular cardboard reel. That reel contained a series of images arranged in sequence, and these images are viewed through the Viewmaster toy, which gave it a lifelike 3D effect. The Viewmasters featured a wide variety of educational content, like geography, history, and others, providing immersive visuals combined with basic storytelling that was both appealing to kids and adults in an age where digital entertainment was only a myth. Today, there's way more advanced visual entertainment with a lot more dynamism like virtual reality and gaming, so the Viewmaster would certainly be way too archaic. Playing arcade games in physical arcades was a significant part of youth culture in the 70s. Arcades were a social hub for children and teenagers and brought out a competitiveness in them. Some of the best players had their names and scores stored on the arcade's top player records, and other kids would try hard to beat that record, so it's needless to say if your record was the highest on the board, you were looked at like a rock star. Some of the most iconic games of the 70s were Space Invaders and Asteroids, which often saw lines of children waiting patiently for their turn with a coin in hand. Arcades operated on a token economy, so kids could pile up the tokens and quarters, waiting for a special trip to splurge on the machines. Players on a budget would pick specific games to try their luck in breaking the record, and of course this meant that the queue got longer and the kids got more riled up. Today, many children have their PC games, Xbox, and PlayStation at home, and arcades are no longer the popular social gathering they once were. Kids prefer to compete with their peers online in real time than to step foot outside doors, and the arcade remains a fond memory of the past.
That tape, the secret was within my grasp.
Cassette tapes were used to record music in the 1970s, and fans of music would record and keep stacks of their favorite music. Sometimes another person may have tapes of musical recordings that you desire but have not been able to catch on the radio. And so, participating in cassette tape trading allowed music fans to share their tapes while bargaining for others that appealed to them. It was typically transactional and could be temporary exchanges or permanent. The beauty of the cassette tape was that anyone could get an empty cassette and record music from radio broadcasts to make a mixtape. The cassette tape trading was also a form of counterculture, allowing fans of music to bypass commercial channels and share music that may not be backed by any major label. It was simply a time when copyrights were difficult to regulate.
A new trimline extension phone brings the dial to you. Why not call?
The rotary phone was a common household item in the 1970s and was mostly used by adults, as kids didn't exactly have an active contact list. Kids often tried to role-play as adults by playing with rotary phones, mimicking conversations they might have heard from the past. Mimicking social interactions of adults was a fun time, and kids loved the tactile experience of creating imaginary conversations with figures on both sides, recreating an entire conversation. Kids today use advanced mobile phones and are unable to fathom the connection that was built with friends while role-playing using a rotary phone.
Start out simple. First, it's new Lego preschool for little hands, then Lego building.
Things were a bit more imaginative in the 1970s, with kids' toys being more of rigid and static. Playing with non-electric toys was one of the pastimes that allowed children to explore their creativity while creating their own action-packed reality. And these non-electric toys included action figures from movies like G.I. Joe and Star Wars. Girls were more inclined to play with dolls and dollhouses like Barbie sets, and Lego bricks were just as popular as they are with kids today. Kids enjoyed the task of building structures like houses and vehicles with endless possibilities, and even though the toys had no form of mobility or used electricity, they were satisfying to play with and served as collectibles as well. Today, kids are more mentally stimulated by kinetic toys and those that have some sort of visual to them, like electronic toys that move or video games. Imagine an era where TV programs are so streamlined that children needed to wait until the weekend to watch an extensive lineup of their favorite cartoons. Watching Saturday morning cartoons was a tradition in many homes in the 70s, and kids would look forward to spending hours in front of the TV on Saturday mornings. These animated shows changed from time to time and often included classics like Bugs Bunny, Scooby-Doo, Tom and Jerry, and more. With the advent of online streaming came a large decline in TV viewership, and most children are completely oblivious to the days of programmed entertainment like Saturday morning cartoons.
The new IBM electronic typewriter, so automatic that while you fold the letter.
In the old days, kids in school were asked to do their assignments with a typewriter before turning them in. Using typewriters for school projects was the peak of academic challenge, and parents or older siblings would come together to help the younger ones accomplish the task. Computers didn't exist in the early 70s and only came in much later in the 70s and 80s. Before then, everyone had to learn to use the typewriter. The task was even more tough if a manual typewriter was being used because it required significant finger strength. While typing classes were formally taught to high school children, the younger ones usually picked up the skill by watching older siblings or parents. The typing process for kids was a meticulous one, as there were no backspaces on typewriters, and any single mistake meant a fresh blank sheet. It became a tasking process, but also quite rewarding as kids took pride in their error-free assignments.
Erector set and go! You can build a shiny fire truck that you can really drive because our power...
Playing with erector sets offered a blending of activities for kids in the 70s and also provided hands-on construction skills and problem solving, which was always a fun time. The erector set was originally invented in 1913 and remained popular through the 70s, especially amongst children who were fascinated by building and engineering. The erector set was composed of a metal construction kit including girders, beams, gears, nuts, wheels, screws, and more, which were all assembled to create complex machines or even simple buildings. Some of the sets even came with small electric motors, allowing for the creation of moving parts like vehicles, working cranes, or elevators. The erector set was a special part of growing up in that era, and children were only limited by their own imagination.
Oh, Storm's got a new card.
Collecting trading cards was another cherished hobby for children in the 1970s. Whether it was movie cards, TV shows, sports, or other themes, kids took pride in the number and variety of collectible cards owned. Children were mostly thrilled by baseball cards, featuring players from major leagues, football, basketball, and hockey cards as well. Those who were not as keen on sports cards collected them from popular shows like Star Trek, Batman, Planet of the Apes, and other humorous cards. The really cool part about collecting them was the satisfaction of owning a complete set of specific genre and eliminating the duplicates. Children would trade cards to acquire complete sets of them in a particular sport or show, and some would even save up money to buy these cards from local shops, while others negotiated tough trades, making sacrifices to acquire the cards they valued the most. This card trading hobby was fun and fulfilling, especially when showing off complete sets to friends.
Oh, so you're Chrissy. No, silly, I am.
TV shows in the 70s were unique, and most times people had to watch in real time. Unlike today, where there are many streaming services and DVRs that allow you to record and watch any show of your choice at your convenience, people in the 70s were used to watching TV shows in real time. This meant that you had to tune in to the channel at a specific time of day, so you'd never miss the program. You couldn't fast forward through the commercials, and if you missed a show, you had to wait until reruns in the summer to watch it again. That made missing a program a big deal. Oftentimes, kids had to watch their favorite shows as they aired. It wasn't always a convenient thing, especially when the rest of the family was looking to catch up with their own scheduled programs.
Calls it the idea book. Wait till you see what I'm getting Jack. You mean I can get all these things with S&H green stamps?
Collecting S&H green stamps was a popular trend that began in the late 1800s and was at its peak in the 1970s. The stamps were offered in the United States to retailers in supermarkets, stores, gas stations, and other establishments as a reward based on the amount of money a customer paid in the purchase of goods. The stamps came in denominations of 1, 10, and 50, and as customers accumulated the stamps, They would moisten the back and mount them on the collector's books, which were also given to the customer for free. When customers filled the books with green stamps, which usually added up to 1,200 points, they could then exchange the filled books with items from the store of similar value. The S&H green stamps were a form of loyalty card, and adults and children participated alike. It was fun to fuss over the number of stamps collected and aspire towards getting more from merchants. In the 1970s, one of the few ways of communicating with loved ones from afar was by sending a handwritten letter. Long before the convenience of social media, texting, and email, letters were skillfully drafted by hand and written for both official and unofficial purposes. Handwritten letters allowed a personal touch and unique style, and whether they were neat or messy, they were accepted as a piece of the sender and were kept in archives for remembrance. Handwritten letters often required thoughtful composition, since there was no room for error. A single alphabet out of place could ruin its aesthetics, so they took longer to write. And the only thing that took longer than writing a letter by hand was receiving one, as it had to go through various processes at the post office and delivery could take time depending on the distance between parties. Either way, it was always delightful to receive a handwritten letter from a loved one, because it often symbolized a personal connection. Building tree houses was a childhood activity that many were particularly fond of, giving children the freedom to create a private play space using their imagination. They were not only structures, they were symbols of independence, a hideaway spot, and a place of adventure. Kids could scavenge for supplies with their friends, and parents would spend a significant amount of time putting the structures together, making sure they were sturdy and safe. Most were made from wood and often came with windows, a door, a ladder, or steps, and sometimes even a pulley system for hoisting up supplies. Tree houses were safe spaces for kids, serving many purposes such as a clubhouse and more. Parents in the 1970s encouraged their children to develop a love for science by buying them a chemistry set. Using chemistry sets was both educational and fun. The idea of mixing chemicals to create a different color was fascinating, and in some cases, a small explosion or a brief fizzling would leave the kids thrilled and excited. Kids would role-play as scientists using the contents of the set, like beakers, test tubes, and others to set up their laboratory. The chemistry set contained substances that may be considered hazardous by today's standards. These substances include magnesium powder, metals, acidic and basic substances. The reactions were usually simple color changes, making of crystals, fizzing reactions, and foamy homemade volcanoes, demonstrating acid-based reactions. Because of safety considerations, the chemistry sets now require parental supervision and precautions on safe use. Listening to vinyl records was a part of every 70s kid's memory. Everyone remembers the crackling noise before the melody enveloped their room. Records were played on stereos almost daily and were supervised by adults because of the fragile nature of the vinyl material. The quality was rich and clear, providing an immersive experience that most would dance to. TVs and radios popularized music, and this led to more people buying vinyl. As other forms of music formats like CDs, cassettes, and others came to market, the appeal for vinyl began to decline, to the extent that children today may not even know what a vinyl record is. Without the possibility of a revival, vinyl will remain a nostalgic memory for music lovers in the 70s. Many toys from the 70s era were either made of or painted with some form of lead. Therefore, playing with toys made of lead was quite common. These toys came in the form of figurines, action figures, cars and trains, dollhouses, and any other accessories, and the lack of awareness about the dangers of using metals placed the general public at risk, especially children who were exposed to the toys on a daily basis. There were numerous cases of heavy metal poisoning which led to the discovery of toxic metals in children's toys. With growing awareness in the late 70s about health issues that could be caused by lead exposure, more strict regulations were enforced for products that were designed for children. The various recalls and safety campaigns led to the removal of old lead-based toys, and replace them with other natural and synthetic materials like wood, plastics, textile fabrics, and chemically safe materials. Which of these things do you remember from the 1970s? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.